Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Overbore, with me, Alex Robbins, and him, Richard Kitchen.
Oh, it's a podcast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hello. Waving doesn't work on podcasts, does it?
I'm glad to hear this is going as well as we expected.
It's exactly as expected. Exactly as expected.
So this is episode 2 of our podcast in which we are trying to bring together new car enthusiasts and old car enthusiasts. I am a motoring journalist and new car road tester with a passion and interest in older cars. Rich is a person who does old car things.
Yeah, I don't know anything about new cars. I work on old cars.
Mm-hmm.
I drive old cars.
Tend to like old cars.
I'm partial to an old car. Yeah. But no, I don't know anything about new cars at all.
So the point of this podcast is really to try and bridge the gap between enthusiasts of new cars who might be interested in learning a little bit more about classic cars, and classic car enthusiasts who think all new cars are rubbish, which I'm here to tell you they are not all rubbish. No. Many of them are, but not all of them.
You could say that's like it was with older cars when they were new.
Yeah.
Like some were bad and some were good.
Yeah.
You could say that nothing's really changed and it's just a generational thing and people are trapped in their own nostalgia.
I mean, it's episode 2 and we've already had a breakthrough.
Is that it? Have we done it?
That's pretty much it.
Is it finished?
We've solved it. We've done Overbore. All right. Thanks, folks. See you later.
Yeah.
No, we will
it
actually...
would be so much slicker if you'd opened the door first time there.
That would have been amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We will actually try and do a podcast, even though we've finished it. We'll try and do a podcast.
You think because we've booked the time? We've booked the Dumpit time.
We've booked the Dumpit time. Yeah, we come to you today from... We're trying to do this in a different car every week. Today we are in Dumpit. Dumpit is the affectionate name given to a Peugeot 106 1.1 Independence, owned by this gentleman here.
Everyone has always said that 106 1.1s or Saxo 1.1s or AX 1.1, anything with this engine... Everyone who says, "Oh no, it's quite quick actually. It's quite nippy," and you always write it off because it's a boy racer, because it's a chav who said it. You're like, well, you would say that. You're just trying to like make it sound like your car's not really slow. And then I drove this and thought, damn, they're right. It's really nippy. Yeah.
And I'd just like to back up this by saying I used to have a Peugeot 205 with this engine in it, which was exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I had a 205 1.1 on the Roland Road as well.
And we now have empirical evidence that is the case. They are actually quite nippy little engines because they do tend to make more horsepower than they are intended to. But we'll come to that a little bit later on. Dumpit was a free car.
Dumpit was given to me for free. I had an email from a viewer of my YouTube channel who said, I have a Peugeot 106. I don't need it anymore. Would you like it? And to be honest with you, I mean, when someone offers you a free car, your instinct is to say yes. Yeah. But I didn't need another car. I needed another car like a hole in the head. So I didn't really go for it. No, it wasn't. I didn't go for it. I was slightly hesitant, and then I thought actually I could run that car for very little. Because it'd be cheap to run, because it would be cheap to tax and everything. Well, as it turns out, not crazy cheap to tax. And so I said yes. Didn't know anything about it. Hadn't seen any pictures of it. All I knew was it was quite low mileage. It's done, as you can see,
44,665 miles. Goodness me.
And so I knew nothing about it. Didn't even know the colour. We went to see the touring cars at Thruxton. And then after that, we drove to Cirencester, or I think that's where this was. And I saw it and thought, now I feel bad, because that's actually quite tidy and it's low mileage. And he gave me the keys and I got in it and drove home.
You drove it away.
And my youngest was sat in passenger's here and he went, it's all right, actually. That's the main thing. Whenever you buy a car or you get a car, if someone gets in the car and goes, it's all right, actually, it means you were expecting it to be awful. And
it turns out it's not.
Better than awful.
There is a real joy in finding a car is much better than you expected it to be, isn't there?
Yeah.
You know, in jumping in a car like this that you're expecting it to be horrible and actually finding it's really not. You feel like you're up on the deal, even if the deal is free.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like I had nowhere to haggle.
Yeah.
I couldn't turn up and kick the tyres and go,
if you give me 50 quid...
You need to give me some money to take it away. But it was MOT. It had a year's MOT on it. And as I say, low mileage. I didn't know what colour it was. And when I Googled... No, I tell you what, I Googled the reg number. Or put it into a reg checker. And it said it was silver. And I thought, Because we already had a silver Saxo, and it was like, silver is like the colour I sort of saw and thought, oh, I'd like that the least. And when we got there, I saw that it wasn't silver. It was this. Well, they called it Iceland silver.
So it's kind of a bluey silver, is what you're saying.
Yes. So it also has a pop-up sunroof, which I'm going to open because it's going to steam up in it. But how many times did you see that?
The wonders of technology.
It's amazing.
Incredible.
It does actually have a leak as well, which is why it's a little bit mouldy there.
That's nice. I'm glad you showed me that after I've ensconced myself in the driver's seat. Thanks. It's good. For listeners, I should just point out that Rich has opened the sunroof.
Oh, yes, of course. I keep forgetting that. Yeah.
Because if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be very aware. But if you're not watching this on YouTube...
So it's got a pop-up sunroof.
It's got a pop-up sunroof.
One of those whether it goes over centre.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying.
And then it lifts itself out of the car.
And it doesn't have a retractable blind.
No, it doesn't. That's true, it doesn't.
If you get the Saxo or the 106 with the windy sunroof, where it lifts up and out and slides back, they've got a retractable blind.
Yeah.
But this one doesn't. So if you're in the heat of summer, say, like when I got it, there is nowhere to hide.
No, it's just
it's very hot.
In your.
This is the window to body ratio is quite strong.
This is a car in which I would always have to wear sun cream because
of the bonds.
Because I have hair.
You could.
There's no way.
Maybe put a towel over the top.
Of my head or the sun?
Can you get one of those little handkerchiefs that people put on their bald head? You could put one on the car.
Good. That's a good point. There we go. Well, that have to be my Dumpit hat.
Yeah, but the thing I liked about it is that it's so much like it's an O2 plate car. So it's a 2002 106. Whereas 106s go, that's quite a late one.
Yeah,
they only made them for another. Well, probably not even 2 years. And it's based on a car that came out originally in it traces heritage back to the AS. Well, it traces heritage back to the AS.
Oh, I suppose that's true. Yeah,
floor pan.
Yeah,
and it's like. You drive down the road and you see cars driving past it at 2002 and you think all that kind of age and you think, one of them will be something that looks completely, so much more modern than this. And you'll forget this is a 2002 car.
Well, it wasn't supposed to still be around in 2002 because ostensibly the 106 was supposed to be replaced by the 206 when it came along.
I don't know
and
how
they kept it going because they suddenly realised they couldn't extend the 206 range down far enough to successfully plug the gap.
I remember you used to read What Car magazines because... exciting.
Yeah.
And they had the 106 was always listed as a super mini.
Yes.
In the same way that a Fiesta or a Corsa or a Clio or whatever was listed as a super mini. And then after a while, like when Citroen brought out the C3 and Peugeot bought, because obviously Citroen, the Saxo and the 106 are, for people who don't know, are the same car.
Yes.
They are basically the same.
Yeah.
When Citroen brought out the C3 and Peugeot had out the 206, then it was around that kind of time I noticed they started having different categories. And then they started having city car.
I can add some context to that.
And super mini. And then the Ford Ka.
Yeah.
Was in the city car.
That's the reason. Is because the city car was not a thing when this car came out. And what happened was, I don't think Ford created the genre with the Ka. But the Ka really popularised the idea of a sub-super mini car. And Peugeot, rather than extinguishing the 106 completely and Citroen the Saxo, they suddenly realised when they launched the 206 that they could reposition the 106 to take on the car, and therefore they would have a B segment, as it's now, A segment, beg your pardon, an A segment competitor, which would, serve as a fairly good rival. And it did, to be fair, because the original idea was that the if you go back to the 205, so we're going to go into our Peugeot history just for a minute here, folks. When Peugeot axed the 205, the idea was that the 106 and the 306 would plug the gap. The lower end of the 306 range,
and they were the conventional size cars.
Well, they were.
They were
the 306. The 306 was, but the 106 was a bit smaller than your usual super mini. It was a little bit smaller than the Fiesta. It was a little bit, as I understand it, was a little bit smaller than the Fiesta, and so on and so forth. So the idea was that the 106 and the 306 would plug the gap left by the 205, but they didn't do it that well, which is why the 205 lasted as long as it did, because Peugeot found that actually buyers weren't converting into either of the two new cars, because actually, I think cars like the Fiesta, cars like the new Corsa had come along, and really had followed in the footsteps of the 205 perfectly. And so they sort of found themselves as that competitor. So the 206, they then launched the 206 with the idea that it would then take over from the 106 and the bottom end of the 306 range. But then, of course, you had cars like the Ka came along, and it meant that the 106 had a reason to exist suddenly once again. So I don't think it was actually supposed to last as long as it did, which is why in 2002 it did actually look quite dated compared with some of the other cars that were around at the time.
It probably looked dated in 1998.
Yeah, you could say that. Well, that was when the midlife facelift was.
No, what, the 106? No, that was 96,
was it?
Very, very early 96, or very late.
Okay, yeah.
I had an NREG 106 Phase 2 diesel, and, and on the back it said, the new
106. Nice,
and excellent. And I was still there looking at it going, it's not that new. I mean, it's a bit newer. It's a bit more rounder. It's got a nicer front, and the styling on the front of these is great. Nice.
No, I agree. And
I still think like the GTIs and the rallies.
Yep.
They just like
they're handsome cars.
They just look right.
Yep, agreed.
They just look right.
Agreed.
So to be honest with you, I would have liked to have something that wasn't another car from the PSA stable because I already have a lot of those. And
we will. Don't worry about that.
We will. But no, I didn't just mean for today. I meant as to be given.
Oh, I see. Yes.
If he'd have said it's you,
he won't have any of those. He's always going to.
If he'd have turned around and said, "I've got a Suzuki," no, I wouldn't have been happier. But if it was something completely alien to what I'd ever had before, that would have been better.
Yeah.
The fact it's a 106 is kind of just completely coincidental. Well, it's not coincidental. He's probably watching my videos
because.
Yeah, but apparently his daughter had it.
Yeah.
But she thought it was too old.
Yeah.
She may have had a point. Because my eldest loves 106s. He's taken to him big time, and he wants one for his first car.
Oh, there you go.
And I look at it and think, and you see all these huge SUVs driving around, and you think, I don't know about that. And he said, "What makes you think I'm going to crash?" And it's not you I'm worried about. Well, I mean, you will crash because you're going to be a young lad, but I don't trust all the people in these 2-ton tanks that can do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. So. I can see why he likes them, but maybe keep it for, he can have a rally when he wants to buy a classic car.
Quite. There you go. So, next important question. What have you been up to since we last recorded the podcast? What have you been working on? What's been happening?
I thought you were going to say, what have you been up to? Because then I would have said, well, Christmas. I haven't done anything.
Now you've dated the podcast. Now everyone knows exactly when we recorded
what year it is. So
you've got to hope it's 2024. Otherwise, this podcast is going out really delayed.
Very long time to edit it. Yeah. Since the last podcast, what have I done? I have been starting to. Well, no, I've undertaken two jobs that have been sat in there waiting for me to work on. Quite rare cars. One of them, a TVR 280i. I've started on the rebuild.
Wow.
So I've fitted a new clutch to the old 2.8 litre Ford Cologne V6.
Nice.
No, it's not. And but the chassis has been painted and everything, and it actually, for a 40-odd-year-old chassis, it's in remarkable condition. I mean, we've welded it up and repaired it.
Sure.
But the bits that haven't been,
yeah,
it looks like it's new in places. Yeah. And there's this thing about TVR, everyone says, the powder coating, it all flakes off, blah, blah. The powder coating in the early 80s, when TVR weren't doing it, they were farming it out to a company in Blackpool who made bus components, I think.
Oh, right.
Brunner International, I think they were called. I joke you not, it's about 1.5 mil thick in places.
It's
like you have to chip it off.
Yeah.
So the actual chassis itself, the bits that didn't rust, because some of it, it's powder coated, it will come off, are in really good condition. So I started rebuilding that, put new wishbones and everything on it. And the other one, which is slightly oddball, is a Noble M10.
Oh, gosh, I haven't seen one of those for years, except the yellow bits of a Noble that you've got hanging on your wall.
Every time I walk in. So the Noble M10, for those who don't know, is the first car Lee Noble built as a Noble. I mean, he built kit cars and things before that. He was behind the Ultima originally. But as a Noble branded car, a Noble, I say we know them today, they're not really a thing.
No, well, I was just going to say, for some listeners may not even be aware of what a Noble is. I mean, a Noble was quite well known in probably the early 2000s.
They were catapulted into the public eye, not public eye, but like in the car world.
They made kind of, I would say, what would you say, Porsche rivaling level cars?
Yeah.
So they were really well respected in their time.
He was good at it's the handling, it's the ride handling balance. Some people have said perhaps he's not got an eye for styling. which you could say
yes and no. Yes and no.
Subjective. But one thing you can't take away is if you drive one, is how it rides the bumps.
Yeah.
Because it does. I mean, Ultimas do this when they've got decent dampers and things.
Ultima is another kind of kit car.
An Ultima GTO. To be fair, he designed the original Ultima,
Exactly.
so I believe he designed the original Ultima. But they do this thing where the suspension is still firm, but like if you hit, say you imagine hitting a curb, if you hit the curb and it's two right angled edges, you imagine the jolt, but it's like the edges are rounded off. So
exactly.
The thump is still there.
Yep.
But it makes it so much nicer to drive down. I mean, like TVR Cerbras like that.
Yep.
Yeah, and the Nobles are like it.
It's one of the things I encounter sometimes when I'm road testing. It always feels to me as though you can feel the bump, but the suspension's added a layer of neoprene to it, just to give it a little bit of take the edge off.
Where there are other cars I've owned that are the opposite.
Yeah.
They make it worse than it needs
Absolutely.
to be. The Nissan Primera GT.
Oh, really?
Was horrendous.
Yeah,
the ride was awful. I mean, it would have handled quite well on the track, but. Yeah. And the MG ZS.
Yes, that had a very.
The ride
very
in that
firm
was
ride.
atrocious. It was just too much. It's one of the reasons I got rid of it.
Yeah.
I thought it's just too bad.
That's the thing. If you read a road test, I think a lot of road tests will say it has a firm ride, but there are different ways of having a firm ride. Sometimes a car can have a firm ride that is acceptable, and sometimes it can have you can have a sports car that has a firm ride that's acceptable because it's a sports car, and you can have a family car that has a firm ride that's not acceptable because it's a family car. It's not supposed to be.
But it's also how it deals with being firm. It's it's that kind of
suppleness.
Yeah, the flexibility of it. So it's like, yes, it's still firm. It doesn't lean. It's it's a sports car, but it rounds the edges off.
Yeah,
it's just good. And if you were going to turn it into a full-on track machine, you'd buy suspension that sharpen the edges again.
Exactly,
because that's what you want. But for a road car, and like it's just a balance that manufacturers get. I mean, you know, a lot of I think Ford tend to get that balance quite.
They're very good at that.
They're quite good at. Well, certainly these, well, maybe not these days, but in the sort of late 90s, early noughties, they were quite good at getting that balance right.
Still be.
The French have always been pretty good at it. In fact, they probably veer more on the softer suspension side. Unless you drive something like, the Clios. I had a C4 VTS.
You did, I remember.
That was, in fact, if anything, that was probably not great. The ride in that.
No,
my brother-in-law
they'd gone a bit too far on the firm.
My brother-in-law got it. I used to drive it round, and it was like, to me, the ride was one of the things I didn't like about it. The chassis on that car was poor. It's a twist beam back axle. It's not great. It was that era of PSA where things were not good.
Yeah.
But my brother-in-law got in that car, and he comes from German cars, and he went, "It's got a ride well, doesn't it?" And I was driving down the road thinking, no.
I think that's something we can definitely explore in a later podcast, is talking about how what you're used to defines
what you're used to, what your perception defines what you think. So
exactly.
That's why you see all these opinions online on social media about cars, and you think none of them have context.
No. It's one of the things that, you know, when you become a motoring journalist. Actually, when I used to work on What Car, they always used to say that it takes 2 years of road testing cars before you can really send somebody out in a car and get a proper verdict, because you need to build up a frame of reference of all the things you've driven, so that you know, well, this is a firm riding car,
sort of thing.
Exactly, and this isn't a firm riding car. You have to develop kind of and that really is the skill in being a motoring journalist, is actually the knowledge. And it's a little bit like being a London taxi driver. You have to have the knowledge before you can really do it properly. You have to have a back catalogue of stuff you've driven and understood, so that you know, in the context of this new car you're being asked to drive now, how does it ride and handle in comparison with its competitors?
Yeah, no, that makes total
because
sense.
if you've only ever driven stuff from the 90s and you go out in a new car nowadays, you will probably find it firm riding, because cars have just got stiffer as time's gone on. Whereas to be able to assess a new car properly and write a review in the context of the other cars people are looking at buying, which is the usefulness of a review, you kind of have to have driven all the other stuff around it as well. You know, you have to have that context.
No, that makes total sense.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing. So that's what you've been up to this week.
Yes, so basically, digging out a Noble M10, which is a giant Lego set that I have no instructions for. And figuring out, because it's all in pieces, and trying to figure out how to put it back together. But they made 6.
Yeah. Is that what they made? Only 6 of them? Crikey. Geez.
Well, actually, I think they made 5. I think there's 5 surviving. I forget exactly. But,
so it was very low volume, but then that led them on to the M12, didn't it? Which was
people who had put a deposit on the M12, on the M10, when they were presented with the M12, which was, the M10 is a convertible.
It's a little roadster, isn't it? Yeah.
challengingly styled. In fact, you could say
It's not pretty.
It's a strange kind of but it's convertible.
Yeah.
It's still got the Ford V6 in it, that one.
Yep.
But it's naturally aspirated. Mm-hmm. And the M12 was turbocharged and a hardtop, and it became more of a sort of track-focused machine. And that's the car that people are going to remember, the M12.
Sure. Yeah.
The one Clarkson drove it on top there, and he was going on about it.
That's it.
Or people who'd put their deposit on the M10 shifted their deposit to the M12 when it was announced, so they only ended up making no one bought an M10 after the M12 came along.
Understandably.
So somewhere there's a lot of moulds for that car.
Yeah.
That were great expense and time were put into making that got used 6 times. So it's it probably wasn't the best, but I mean it worked because the M12 sold like hotcakes, didn't it? So
true.
That's the car everyone remembers.
Do you know what? I don't actually know what happened to Noble after that. Because they didn't really make a success of the M12, did they? The M12 was...
The M12 was successful when it got...
was
it revolved into the M300.
That's it. That's the M300. I was just trying to think there was
and then there was the M400, and I think there was a 500 and a 600. That's the one that it was a different style car. I actually thought it looked okay. And that had a Volvo V8 in it, which was Yamaha.
Yeah, the Yamaha V8.
That's Yamaha V8, engine, which is one of the smallest. It's a 60-degree V8.
Yeah.
So I really want to hear one of those up close. But Lee Noble... Well, you can follow Lee Noble online, and he's not happy about how it went, and he still writes about how it ended. But I think basically he sold it to someone, the company. He sold the company to someone, and then they've mismanaged it or whatever. But they were being sold in America as Rossians.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Rossian Q1, I think it was the M300.
Okay.
But the body, that's the other thing. The bodies, I don't know if the whole car was being assembled there, but the bodies were being built in South Africa.
Okay, wow.
For the M12.
Okay.
Whereas like the M10, he made them all at home.
Yeah.
That was... It's kind of built a bit like a Lotus Elise, but without the complex chassis. It's a good chassis from a driving point of view, but it's just a tubular steel chassis. And then all the body is kind of riveted and bonded
in much
to
the same way as a TVR.
Well, no, TVR's got the metal tubular chassis, but the body is like one piece and it drops on.
I see, okay.
And bolts on, whereas this, it's clad.
I see. So kind of done in bits.
Yeah,
rather
so you've got
solid.
they're called clamshells, basically,
okay.
So same as Lotus.
Cool.
Lotus Elise.
Cool.
So, I've been working on that, and the man who bought it has owned it he bought it new.
Good grief.
Yeah, he bought it. He
was one of those who didn't move his deposit across?
No. Well, I don't know if the M12 was announced at the time, because that one's number 3, I think.
Right, okay.
So it might
so it might have been so early.
Before that, yeah, but...
I wonder how he felt when the M12 came out.
I don't know, he might have preferred having the convertible. I mean, I have driven it with the roof off, and it's not a noisy car.
No.
It's got quite a muffled exhaust on, but you've got the Ford V6, which
you can hear
it's not as great as V6s go.
No.
It's kind of people... You can take or leave it, I suppose, the Geratech V6. But it makes a good noise.
Yeah.
It always has made a good noise. And that one, I put an ST200 inlet manifold on that one.
Oh, nice.
So it's a bit more
fruity
when you put your foot down,
Excellent.
So it's an interesting car,
nice.
Interesting part of British sports car history that no one knows.
Cool. Well, for my part this week, I didn't ask. No, well, I know you didn't. I was waiting for you to ask. You didn't get around to it, did you?
Oh yeah. What have you been up to?
There we go. There it is.
Is it interesting?
Not really.
Oh.
I've been driving a car you will not like.
So that's most new cars.
Oh, but this is to another level.
It's an SUV.
It's an SUV.
It's either electric or it's incredibly ostentatious.
It's incredibly ostentatious.
It is obnoxious to a biblical level.
You would consider it so, yes. There are people out there who would love it, but
probably not people listening to this.
Well, it depends on who our audience is. Depends on. We might have people who absolutely love a Lamborghini Urus. It
sounds a little bit like urethra, doesn't it? Urine.
I couldn't possibly comment. I've been driving a bright orange Lamborghini Urus this week. Well, actually,
the shrinking violet on wheels.
Yeah, it was quite something. It's a car you drive around and everybody looks at it, and it's fascinating to see how people react to it on the road.
I imagine there are 2 types of reaction. The people who, with the fake tans and the bling, and the footballers who look at it and go, yes, I like that. And the other people who look at you with just pure hatred.
There's a bit of that, but I think there's quite a lot of people who look at it and they see it's a Lamborghini, and no matter how they are, whether they think it's, it's a big vulgar thing, there's still a lot of people who are kind of like, recognise that it is a very fast car and are intrigued by it on that level.
So is it a very fast car?
Yeah, 789
you could buy an electric whatever SUV.
Yep.
Is it like that much faster still than those?
What you've got to understand about an electric SUV is that an electric SUV, even a quick one, will be quick off the line, but the power, the acceleration, because it's a single speed gearbox, the acceleration tails off as they get faster. So the difference with a really fast internal combustion engine car is still that if you put your foot down at 70, it can still rip your face off. Whereas a really fast electric SUV still can, like a Porsche. It's not an SUV. A really fast electric car, like a Porsche Taycan, still can. In fact, Taycans have a 2-speed gearbox in order to enable them to do that higher up the speed range. But where an internal combustion engine car really gets into its own is sort of when you're already moving, if that makes sense. And a fast EV feels quick when you take off from a standstill, but it feels slightly less. It still feels quick, but perhaps slightly less so when you're already moving. Whereas a fast internal combustion engine car, like the Lamborghini, and of course, don't forget, you've also got all the noise that goes with it, which is an integral factor, and it does make a car feel faster. And there's no kind of getting away from that fact. The oral soundtrack of a car like that, you can't escape the fact it does make it feel more of an event and faster. I think a lot of electric car manufacturers are starting to kind of tacitly accept that fact. We talked in the last podcast about the Ioniq 5N that has that. Yeah,
did you get your check from Hyundai in the end? Sounded like a bit of an advert, that one.
Little brown envelope. we're so often accused of taking bungs from manufacturers. I think I've been accused of taking...
get accused of it every week.
I think I've been accused of taking a bung from every single manufacturer. If I had, I'd be driving around in something far more impressive than the car I do. But
oh, don't be so harsh on your Skoda. Super. Do you know what my eldest downloaded a game for their phone the other day, Top Drives.
Right.
And one of the cars he opened in his first pack was a Skoda Superb.
No, was it?
Do you know what his response was?
Oh, I bet it was awful.
What a stupidly named car. And I said, yes, it is.
It is. Yeah, I can't deny that. But
terrible.
But I will say in its defence, it's unlike the Mitsubishi Charisma, which was another stupidly named car, in that it does actually live up to its name. The Charisma did not have the Charisma.
You believe that
whereas
is a superb car?
Is a superb
You believe it's a superb car?
Absolutely. Well, I own one. I wouldn't have chosen it if
where does the Skoda Yeti fall into that?
Well, I haven't owned one Yeti.
But is a Yeti?
Completely glossed over that. Can't believe you did that. I haven't owned one Yeti.
Oh, that's...
Dear. Why am I even doing this podcast with you?
I don't know.
Don't entertain my dad jokes.
I don't need dad jokes. I make dad jokes. I don't need to, hear others.
Anyway, so long story short, I've been driving around in a bright orange Lamborghini Urus this week. It is very fast. I kind of think it's a bit too... the ride is not great even in comfort mode.
How friendly are you with the Lamborghini press team?
Are you
going to get another car?
I don't know. I don't operate on the basis of whether I'm going to get another car. I operate on the basis of telling the truth and being honest. Journalistic ethics.
So this is it, right? So as a journalist, right? So when I think of motoring journalism, I hark back to, and I don't know if you'll agree, I hark back to the glory days.
Oh yeah.
To me, that is like Car Magazine in the 90s.
Yeah.
That is Auto Car. It's kind of like that is. Like, they will tell you their opinion.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, they don't care who they piss off. They think this is rubbish, they're going to say.
Yeah.
And what I don't read as much these days, but these days you don't seem to get that. You seem to get less people willing to slag something off. And it's like, is that because, they don't want to upset the people who bite the hand that feeds them sort of thing? Or is it that cars are genuinely there are no bad cars now? They've all ironed the kinks out and it's just which ones you prefer? Or what? Is everyone just being kind now?
My gut feel is that it's a little bit of the latter too. I don't think anybody... I've never met a motoring journalist who's unhappy to slag something off. And in fact, I would go as far as to say that quite often a journalist will enjoy having something where they can really get their teeth into it. Because you can... It's more entertaining to write bad things about a car. You can get your teeth into something if something does deserve a kicking, and if it really is that bad that it deserves a kicking, it's quite... you can... it writes itself better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
it's just a sort of.
So actually,
all right.
I think people are. I would say that actually people are less inclined to be kind. I do think there's a lot in it that a lot of modern cars are pretty competent, and therefore it's hard to find a car in which you can say everything is bad about it. Like, there is always a saving grace.
There must be the case for cars, like, from all eras, though. There must have been, like, something.
Not necessarily. I mean, back in the day, you had things like, and I know that their perceptions changed over time because people look back with more nostalgia. But if you look, back in the day, things like Ladas and Skodas were atrocious. They were absolutely atrocious. I mean, you could have a test car come in that the door would fall off. I mean, that doesn't happen nowadays. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You wouldn't give 2 stars to a car, you wouldn't give 3 stars to a car you'd had and the door fell off. That would be an instant kicking, obviously, because the car is useless. Whereas these days...
Depends if you want to exit quickly. If you need to get out quickly, that's a good feature.
Yeah. Whereas these days, it's definitely the case that, the cars are better. I don't know one journalist who would not write bad things about a car if it deserved it in order to stay in the good books of the manufacturer. There are definitely people who will do that, and I think it's more you're looking at publications that struggle to get cars. You're looking at perhaps influencers. You might be looking at YouTubers who've just got their first press car, might be very inclined to say, well, I'm not going to give it a kicking, am I? Because I've just got a press car. And then other press fleets are looking at you and saying, well, but most of the time a journalist, how to put this, most of the time a press fleet will know when they've got a dud on their hands. They're not idiots. They are, some of them are ex-journalists themselves. They will know when they've got a rough car. And if you write, this is a rough car, a lot of them are actually more likely to respect you because they know you're telling the truth. And then when you have a good car when they have a good car on their hands, they know that you will write that as well.
Well, this is, I think.
Whereas if you're constantly just saying this car is great, the readership is not going to listen to you because they're going to work it out. And therefore, the manufacturer is not that interested in dealing with you because they know that your readership
don't take your opinion seriously.
Exactly
because
that.
You're just too nice all the time.
Exactly. So it is actually a self-defeating thing. If you're too nice all the time, the manufacturer actually doesn't really want to deal with you in the end. So
how did you give the Lamborghini a kicking?
I haven't written it yet.
Are you going to give it a kicking?
I think I'm going to give it a kicking, but it's not quite what I would like it to be. I've driven the car.
What did you expect a 2.5 ton, 700 horsepower SUV to be like?
You've got to look at the intended. When you're road testing a car, you've got to think about whether it's fit for the intended purchaser. Is the Lamborghini? You
need to put yourself in the position of being a footballer.
Pretty much, yeah. And I think you've got to be honest to your readership. You've got to say, is the person who's reading this going to want to buy it if they're in the market for this kind of car? Now, I might really not like. The Lamborghini Urus, I shall put it diplomatically, is not the kind of car I would want to buy myself.
Really?
I could not see myself in one. But that doesn't mean that I can sit there and slag it off and say this car is rubbish and I hate it.
That's the beauty of the world. You can exactly do that.
I can't, because I've got a duty to my readership, the people who might be interested in buying it, to say whether it's worth buying or not. Now, on the basis of whether it's worth buying or not, I personally don't think it is. I think in an SUV you want a little bit more usability and less of the I'm a Lamborghini all the time, which is what it does.
It's not as bad as the Lotus SUV.
I've not driven one of those, so I couldn't possibly comment.
No, I haven't driven one. I don't need to. It's so wrong. It's just against every. I mean, Lamborghini. Yeah. You could argue and say Lamborghinis have always been huge, heavy, in your face type, and then driving dynamics take a back seat to kind of just the drama of everything. Yep. So you could argue that this SUV possibly does give you a lot of drama for an SUV. Yes. But the Lotus SUV...
And what you've just hit on there is kind of the angle you're going with as a journalist, is you're saying, well, does this hit its brief, rather than do I like it? And I think that's the problem, is a lot of people think journalists...
I couldn't slip in. That's why I'd be poor at it, because I couldn't be... I'd just be like, I don't care if it hits its brief, it's pig ugly. Mm-hmm. It looks like arse.
I think I think that's entirely fair, and, my feelings on certain cars are, God, I hate this when I drive it. But I also have to think about whether it fits the bill. There are. You have to
think. If you're driving it and thinking, God, I hate this, you have to. I suppose you have to split whether is this just something that's bugging me? Yeah. Like, will most people care about this?
Exactly.
Or will everyone hate this?
Exactly. That's it. You should be a motoring journalist, because you've summed it up in far fewer words than I could have done. But
I don't care if everyone hates it. If it's bugging me, I'm going to tell everyone. I'm just going to moan. What's the last car you remember giving a vicious kicking to?
Oh gosh. wasn't very well. I think probably the SsangYong did an electric Corando that I thought was cheap, but it wasn't good value, if that makes sense.
Right, okay.
You can have a car that's cheap and you can have a car that's good value, and they're two different things.
So it was cheap, but it was still worse than walking?
Absolutely.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
You know, it wasn't very good. And, you know, it was very roomy, but that was about all it had going for it. And, you know, as an electric car, it was quite affordable. But then, you know, MG will sell you an affordable electric car that's actually vaguely good, you know, and that's not, you know, when you have that alternative, that's the thing. You're always trying to do this in the context of what else is on the market. You're trying to compare it with its rivals in the way that somebody who was looking for that kind of car would be comparing it with other cars of its type. Because your usefulness as a reviewer is to say to that person who's looking to buy that car, should you buy this one or that one?
Do you know, I think that's what journalists did less back in the day.
Possibly.
I don't think they thought about it from the consumer's point of view.
And I think they
thought about it from a car enthusiast stroke journalist point of view.
I think you could certainly make that allegation, and I would say that I think a lot more journalists these days try and think about it from the consumer's point of view.
Maybe that's what's changed.
Which may be what's changed. Yeah, I mean, it might be what's changed. I think there's a lot less of... I try and put a lot less of me into a review and a lot less more of, well, what do you want? A lot less more.
A lot less more.
I should be a writer with those sorts of...
You should be a professional
writer. With that sort
writer.
of grammar, I should be a professional writer. And I think that I think is the mindset that a lot more journalists are in these days. Partly because...
Is that what publications want?
I think...
Is that what shifts copies and or gets subscriptions online? Or
it's difficult. I think part of it is because back in the day, people who bought car magazines were car enthusiasts. Whereas these days we're writing reviews not only for people who buy magazines, but also for online, where people who are coming to view those reviews are people who are in the market for those cars, who may not be car enthusiasts necessarily. So you're trying to provide a useful service.
For a product review.
Yeah, you're trying to provide a useful service rather than entertainment. I think that is the defining line. Is back in the day it was a lot more about entertainment, whereas nowadays it's a lot more about providing a useful service.
Do you wish it was more about entertainment?
Sometimes, yes.
There are probably still publications out there where it is about entertainment.
Yeah, and I would say I'm lucky in that writing. You know, my chief client is the Telegraph. That's the publication I write for most of all. And in that context, I have the flexibility to be a bit more about entertainment if I want to be, and if the car warrants it. You know, for example, with the Lamborghini, I probably can be a bit more about entertainment because most people who are looking to buy it are probably not reading, you know, a review of it. They're going to go and buy it whether they read my review or not. But there's still got to be an element, to my mind, of saying whether it's a good car in the context. You know, and that to me is probably one of the reasons I don't like it as much, is because to me an SUV needs to be more usable than a regular Lamborghini. It needs to, if it's going to be the kind of car, if it's going to be the kind of car you're going to put your kids in and take them, you know, a lot of people I think will buy a Urus as a daily. They will have a bunch of other cars and they will buy a Urus as their thing to drive them to work and back, or drive the kids around, or if you want to be really chauvinistic about it, for the wife to drive the kids around.
It's a strange thing, because, like, to me, if I had that much money and I had a garage full of expensive cars, I'd want my daily to be something like a Skoda Superb.
Yes, absolutely.
I just don't look at me. This is my shrinking into the background, taking a break from that lot. I don't care where I park it.
I would tend to think the same way as you, but this is what I'm saying, is that people who are buying these cars don't think that same way
all the time.
Maybe, yeah, you know.
Look at me, I've got money.
But also, what's quite entertaining is I've seen about 3 or 4 Uruses driving around, and all the ones I've seen are painted black with black wheels and black windows. So these people obviously don't want to be looked at too much.
They haven't unlocked the DLC yet. Do you get that reference?
No, I don't.
No, I didn't think
I'm just
so.
laughing along. No. You have to explain the reference now for our listeners.
I don't know, because they'll know. Well, they probably.
Will they?
No, I don't know. Unlock the DLC. If you back in the day,
I'm very down with the kids. So
you don't see it much. Downloaded content. I think it was back in the day. It was one of the forces where if you when you started racing online, you obviously you had cars that came in the game. I have to do a podcast on car games once.
Oh, definitely.
One day. You won't be able to add to it.
No,
but
I'll just sit here looking pretty.
Yeah. What, you're gonna put a mask on or something, or
get a wig?
No, so like back in the day, you would play the game, and the game came with a lot of cars on it, and then over time the developers would add new cars to the game, which you could then pay a small fee for and download them and add them to your game.
Of course, yes.
They were called DLC.
Yeah, that makes
and
sense.
when you started racing online against other people, sometimes you used to see people who had downloaded a car that you were racing against people. They've downloaded a car, but you haven't. So on one of the Forzas, they all used to appear as a Volkswagen Jetta.
Great.
A black Volkswagen Jetta, black windows, black wheels. It was just like the NPC, which is another
I see. I know
computer.
NPC. I got
Yeah,
that
it
one,
was just like, it was, and you see jokes on like Instagram, bro hasn't unlocked the DLC or something like that.
See.
And you get it with characters. There used to be characters on like, not the sort of, I used to play car games mainly, but there'd be characters where like the figure is just black.
Right,
there's just no texture. There's nothing. It's just like there's a bit of texture to tell it's a person.
Yeah.
There's no features. It's just black shoes, black trousers, black top, black hair, black face, and it's like, you know, well, that would get us demonetised, wouldn't it? But you know what I mean? It was like, and and it was a Volkswagen Jetta.
Yeah.
So every time, and I think they call them murder spec.
Right. Yeah. Murdered out. Yeah.
And so every time I see a car with like black wheels, black windows, I'm just like, it's locked DLC.
And now I'm going to think that as well.
Yeah. But it double points if it is a Volkswagen Jetta.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. It was a Jetta. What's the Golf? There was a Jetta version of the Golf Mark 5, wasn't there?
Yes.
Because the Bora was the version. Oh no, was it a Bora?
Bora was the Mark 4.
Oh, I got people screaming on the podcast if they've listened. No, I think it was a Bora. I think it was a Bora.
Vento was the Mark 3, but only here because in America it was a Jetta.
They still call it the Jetta, yeah.
There you go.
No, I think it was a Bora.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a Bora.
I think we're going to have to move on soon because we might be a bit boring.
I thought it was very interesting, but yeah. So
saw you registered that one though. You just walked over it.
Yeah, you're going to have to stop with these stupid jokes. I can't guarantee I'm going to notice all of them.
We should move on because we have been talking about Lamborghinis for too long now. One thing that's come out in the news today is that there is a
new Lamborghini SUV. Is there? Wow, let's talk about that.
There is a new proposal from the DVLA that old cars.
Is it from the DVLA?
Sorry, no, it's a Teleline.
DVSA.
It might be a DVSA.
Or motoring.
It might not even be from the DVSA.
From the man.
There is a new proposal as a result of a survey.
Yes.
A survey carried out by some people.
Asking the public to choose.
Asking the public whether we should start MOTing old cars again. Cars which are over 40 years old. And this has been a thing, how long ago?
Since it started.
Since
they stopped MOTing.
Since they stopped MOTing old cars. The regulation came in a few years ago where it basically said you don't have to MOT a car that's 40 years old or older anymore, which you and I were a bit not sure about. But you have developed complex feelings on the matter since. And
you're saying I've sold out?
Basically, yeah. No, it's an interesting topic because my gut feel has always been that the argument has always been that an older car doesn't need an MOT because generally they're owned by people who will look after them anyway, so you don't really need to keep
which is an argument I contest.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem with that
100%.
Yeah.
That one, that doesn't, because people who think they look after a car are people who go and get their Autoglim or any other polishing kit. I don't polish cars. Megoirs or something like that. Whatever.
This is like me with computer games.
What do people put on their cars these days? They have a system.
Yeah.
They have a process. They
Snow
do
foam.
a deep clean and a correction. It's like goopy reindeer drop polish or something like that. And they anyway, so they spend their time and the car is presented. Lovely. Tyres are all shiny because they've covered them in silicone and the paint's all polished and everything, like the engine bay's all like they've tarted the engine bay up and the little rusty bracket on the engine. They've got their little brush out and they've brushed it black and everything like that. And underneath it's a pile of junk. And they live at home. They don't have ramps. And even if they had ramps, they might not have the knowledge. They don't know what a loose ball joint, how that would be tested. They don't know. There's so many things they don't know. And you see a lot of cars where the beauty is only skin deep.
Yeah.
And and I've owned them, and that was while we had MOTs.
Yeah,
because it's not hard to. This is the thing. That's why I've got complex feelings on it. You've got cars that the beauty is skin deep and everything like that, but they weren't really getting picked up before because the MOT for old cars wasn't really fit for purpose, which is half the reason I think why they've done the 40-year exemption, because it's cheaper than adjusting the test to fit in all these different eras and technologies of cars. You know, in my Hillman Imp, I put that in for MOT sometimes, and he'd do the bits that he could do, and he'd kind of just stand there looking at it, going, "Well, I've done it." That's all there is. It's pre-emissions, it's pre this, it's pre that. It's like, you know. So I think the issue they've got is that the cars weren't particularly well looked after in the first place. Some are, not all, but a lot of cars aren't. And now they've said they don't have to be MOT'd because people are less likely to have an accident. Because that's what the logic was. The logic was you're going to have less likely to have an accident involving an old car. The percentage of old cars that were involved in accidents was so low that it was not a consideration. And it's, to me, I'm kind of like, on two hands, I'm thinking, well, two fingers rather, I'm thinking, well, point one, yeah, because they were MOT. So, and now they're not. And you're putting it all into the hands of the owner. A lot of them don't know as much as they think they do. And then the other point is that I've lost it completely. I've forgotten it. It's in my bloody head. And it was just like, I just suddenly sat there and thought, I've just insulted the owners. And now I can't think what the other point was. But it was basically, it's just that the system isn't set up for the diverse mix of cars that we've got now, isn't it? In the same way that, like, I've spoke to a guy who runs a new garage the other day, and they get people bringing electric cars to them for a service because they've got their scheduled servicing. You know, the car's 2-3 years old or whatever. And he says it comes in, and he's like, well,
check the brake fluid.
I mean, like, there's not really much I can do. And, and a lot of garages still run, I don't know how they do it, but they still run on this fixed price servicing thing. Like, in interim service, 150 quid. And I personally look at that and think, well, how can you do that? Like, all cars need different things. I don't see how that works. But he said, with electric cars, it doesn't really fit. They're so different. And it's kind of like that with older cars, the technology. I mean, like, there's nothing. My Hillman Imp used to get an advisory for Kingpin play when it went in for an MOT. And then on the last MOT it had, because I have actually exempted that one, but I don't really, well, it's broken, so I can't drive it, so there's no issue. But I did exempt that one to use it.
Self-solving problem.
Yes. It was basically I didn't have enough time to get it ready to take it on a track day. And then one year it didn't have the advisory on Kingpins. And I said, oh, where's the play gone? And he said, no, it's not on the menu anymore. And I thought, right, okay. So it's a complex problem. I mean, it's good that they've looked back into it. It's good that they've asked people in the industry. As I
understand it, the responses to the survey suggested that 41% of people said that old cars should get an MOT again. Around a third said they were quite happy with things the way they are. Some of the respondents included clubs and heritage vehicle associations who suggested that there should be a different kind of MOT test for older cars, which I think was your suggestion.
That's what I said from day one. I think you can put the how would you put it, the responsibility of the condition of the car on the owner, which is the same for any car. Sure. Whoever, it's all very well saying, oh, it's got an MOT. And it's like, yes, but that's only valid at the time it was done. Yeah. If you get into a car a week later and it's got bald tyres, it's your responsibility, not the MOT test. It's true. So you've always got a responsibility as the owner. But I think you should have a responsibility to have some kind of third-party test conducted or inspection conducted on a car to say, so you take it to, you've got an MG or something like that, you take it to an MG specialist and they do a yearly or bi-yearly, I suppose it could be 2 yearly, sort of condition check or something like that.
Certificate of roadworthiness.
Yeah, exactly that. COR.
Yeah,
a core.
A classic vehicle certificate of roadworthiness.
Yeah, something like that. And so there isn't. It doesn't have to be a government guidelined thing. It doesn't have to be because that involves cost. When the government say they don't have any money, and I'm guessing they probably have a lot, but not enough. So and it's not asking garages, MOT stations to do anything differently. Just take, and I'm not saying this because I run a garage. I don't want people to bring me these cars at the moment. Honestly, the thing is, this is the thing. When I do TVR servicing on the sort of 80s, 90s era TVRs, and to be honest with you, pretty much, if you actually do a service properly, and a lot of places don't, they just skip it and bill people. But if you actually do the service properly, you do look at the things that would have failed the MOT. You check for the safety items. So as long as you've got, so you could say that, if you're following a service schedule, as long as the service does cover these points, then that's good enough. It does put a bit more onus on a garage, like if someone were to drive off and, a ball joint pops out that 5 miles down the road. But that would have been the case anyway. Yeah. If you just serviced it. So, yeah, I think they should do something. But I don't think they have to come up with a new government or department level test or anything like that. It can be done through specialists that are already out there. Which, if they want to try and help the heritage sector. Because that is one of the reasons why we keep classic cars on the road here. We've got a massive heritage sector. There's a lot of money and a lot of people working in it. Then to give them that job to do. Give them, say, if you're looking after your car properly, you can say it's all on your responsibility. In exactly the same way that as if you drive in Germany on the autobahn, if you're doing under 130 kilometers an hour and you have a crash, your investigator. No, how do they do it? I think the onus is on you to prove that you were being safe if you're going faster. You can go as fast as you want, but if you have a crash over 130, they investigate you a lot more. Yeah. Because they're like, no, it's just on you to prove that you were being safe. Yeah. Whereas under that, you can be like, right, well, you were driving within sensible limits. It's something like that. I
suppose being devil's advocate, I largely think what you're suggesting is a good idea. It would take some setting up, though, and, you'd have to have a way of verifying that the people carrying out these checks are doing so to a set standard. Otherwise, you'd end up with a bunch of people basically just going, we'll fill out the paperwork.
You have, but if you look at the service schedules on a lot of cars, they do cover the parts on an MOT, because people think that's one of the big problems we've got. When you say service, people think, I see this all the time. Someone's, they're on Facebook and I've just serviced my car. They change the oil. Yeah. And maybe the spark plug. Yeah. That's not a service. No. You've changed the oil. Yeah. A service is when you get on the car and you're checking all the joints for play. You're checking the suspension bushes for condition. You're checking them for play. You're checking the brake hoses. You're checking the calipers. You're taking the sliders out the calipers and cleaning all the gunk off them and re-greasing them and putting them back in so they don't, bind on one side. And it's just things like that. It's proper maintenance. And you'd think that really with people with classic cars, the over 40-year-old cars, their car is their pride and joy, or they're more likely to put the effort into it. Well, you'd think, but a lot of people don't. I get so many cars in here where they spend so long polishing it, and I drive it and think, what a piece of junk, like what a piece of crap, because it's just all superficial. It's all superficial. It's all on the surface. Yep. And that happens a lot. So cars like that would have some, they get. What was it I had in there? It was an awful Citroen D Special recently.
Oh, terrible!
No, it wasn't that. It was. Was it another D?
You did have a D.
I had another D in there.
A blue. Was it a D Super or something?
I think it was a D Super. Yeah. Because it doesn't have to have an MOT. Yeah. I could have got my head in the hole that was in the floor underneath it. No one's looked at it.
That can't be right in my head. Something's got to be done about that.
And that's near the rear suspension, man. Yeah. Now, technically speaking, that's on the responsibility of the owner. Yeah. But the owner's not going to do anything about it.
And nobody's going to tell him to do so unless he has a crash and it's discovered that is the cause of the crash.
And and
at which point it's too late.
Yeah. It's the whole getting away with it thing.
Exactly.
So it's easier just, if you don't have a garage or a ramp or the facilities, it's easier just to turn a blind eye and put your fingers in your ears and go la la la. But on one hand you could say, well, how many times does a Citroen DS drive down the road and the back suspension fall off and it spear off and kill someone?
More times than you'd think.
Well, it probably isn't a common thing, admittedly, but once is too much if it can be avoided by simple checks. So I don't think they have to have a yearly official test, but I think the onus should be on the owner. It said, look, you can have the freedom to drive these cars on the road, and you don't have to pay for the tax, and everything like that. And you can enjoy them, and people like to see them, and it's all good. And you can even drive them in. It's easier to drive them in towns and cities these days than it is in other countries. But the onus is on you to prove that it is roadworthy.
And the best way to do that is to have a classic
an independent
vehicle certificate of roadworthiness.
Yeah, have an independent inspection. Now, whether the faint line between them to me is whether you say, does the maintenance schedule of a car, could that cover it? Because on a TVR, it can. And I only say TVR because that's what I know. If you have an old TVR, it would cover it because you check so much on a TVR. I mean, a TVR service schedule every 12,000 miles, you change the diff oil. You could even I'm just thinking on the fly here, you could even get to a point where you're saying, a classic insurer could say to a person, well, in order to qualify for classic car insurance, you need to have your classic vehicle certificate of roadworthiness. Yeah, it's good, At which point, it's not a government mandated thing. It's not a government, but it becomes a way in which you save a lot of money on your car insurance. It does. I suppose the only disadvantage to it is people could fudge the system. You could fake a certificate. But that's my worry. Not a government-backed thing,
there's going to have to be a level of there's going to have to be a level of oversight if you're leaving it to the specialists. But then that happens now with MOTs. You can get a moody MOT on a car. You chip an MOT, test 100 quid. That's true. And they stick another car on when you're having your emissions done. Yeah. It happens now. So it would weed some of it out. Basically say insurance companies levy and they're allowed to charge you an extra 200 quid a year. Yeah. If you don't prove that your car is roadworthy, yeah, exactly. And a garage, because it's an insurance, it's in an insurer's interest. Because if your car is not roadworthy, 100%, you're more liable to have an accident that'll take out somebody else, completely. And then they're on the hook to pay for it. And if a garage is willing to put their name on this document, then the onus is on them as well. I mean, like if I service a car, for example, and then 2 weeks later it has an almighty crash, I'd have it on I'd have a job to prove that it was nothing to do with me. Sure. And that you didn't fail to detect something that could have resulted in that crash. So of course. Then you might find that classic garages start putting their prices up because the level of responsibility and reliability that's in it means, well, we need to make a bit more out of this, because otherwise it's not worth doing it. Yeah. It will sort the men from the boys, basically. You'll have to get some garages will say, no, we're not doing that. And others will be like, no, we're confident in our work, we'll do that. So it sounds like this idea has quite a lot of upsides then. It's almost like I'm good at this. I think we've solved that as well then. We've solved two things this episode. I'm good at something. Well, Mum, guess what? I'm not a failure. I know you said I was. Given that we've solved two things, what do you reckon next episode we should try world hunger? Yeah? I think we can do that. We've got that. I think what we can do is we can make caravans be able to be towed faster. Yeah, great, fine. Because everyone can use motorways in this country so well that there's no issue. They're always in the right lane. Amazing. Yeah, good. It won't be a problem. Great. So that's my contribution. Nice, lovely. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. It's been a joy to have you. And we will see you next time on Overbore. Bye bye. Oh, bye. Yeah.